Introducing an all-new channel, JG9 News, where we talk all things NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format. Newest video is up, where I talk about Bill Belichick and his departure from the New England Patriots after 24 years in charge. Go check it out if you haven't already. And now, on with our feature presentation. January 4th, 2003. It's the Wild Card weekend, and we've got a game on our hands at Giants Stadium between the New York Jets and the Indianapolis Colts. For the Jets, who somehow won the AFC East after starting the season 2-5, the fact that they're hosting this game is somewhat of a miracle that no one saw coming even so much as 2 weeks before, when they were 7-7 and just lost a heartbreaker to the Chicago Bears. And now, they're going up against the Colts, with one of the best quarterbacks in football in Peyton Manning, and led by head coach Tony Dungy, who was in his first season with the team after getting fired following some successful seasons, but never quite getting over the hump with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The winner of this scheme gets to keep their season alive, probably with a date against the number 1 seeded Oakland Raiders if all the seeds hold, while the loser has their season end, with the team being forced to watch the rest of the playoffs from their couch, with their dreams of the Lombardi Trophy having to be put on hold for another year. And in the end, this game was ugly with a capital U. It was a complete and utter blowout, not even remotely close. Because when the final whistle sounded, and when all was said and done, the Jets put together one of the most dominant and one of the most convincing performances in the history of the playoffs, taking it by a final score of 41-0. To this day, this remains, excluding the 1940 NFL Championship, where Chicago defeated Washington 73-0, the largest shutout in playoff history, and it remains the last time as of this video that the Jets hosted a playoff game. Everything went right for the Jets on this day, and I truly mean everything. They had more than double the total yardage of the Colts, outgaining them 396 to 176. They had more than 2.5 times the number of first downs that the Colts had, winning that battle 26 to 10. They held on to the ball for over 40 minutes in the 60-minute contest, so they had possession for over 67% of the game. They won the turnover battle by 3. They forced future Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning to have, quite possibly, his worst playoff game ever, as he went 14 for 31 with 137 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a passer rating of 31.3, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. On the other side, Chad Pennington had one of the most efficient playoff games by any quarterback ever, completing 76% of his passes for 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a passer rating of 142, less than 20 points shy of the coveted perfect passer rating mark. Bottom line, the Jets were in complete control of the contest from the moment this scheme kicked off, and there was not exactly a whole lot of drama on the field. Not that anyone was going to bed early, since this scheme was the first of 2 wildcard games that day, but at least you can make your Saturday night plans if you wanted to go out relatively early and didn't care about the other game, since this one was not even close. But while there wasn't really any drama on the field, as the Jets won this game rather convincingly, oh man, there was a ton of drama off the field when it came to the broadcast. Because you might notice something a bit weird about this broadcast, and who was calling it. That's right, the game was being called by these guys right here. Brent Musburger on play-by-play, and Gary Danielson on color commentary. You are looking live at the broadcast booth for this game, which is a bit odd, seeing as Musburger and Danielson called college football games. This was their first NFL game of the season. Their first NFL assignment was a playoff game, and not just any playoff game, but a playoff game on national TV in front of the biggest media market in the country. And to say that there was outrage and confusion over this would be putting it lightly. Not just from fans, but for the main purposes of our story, one NFL announcer in particular that got snubbed by ABC from calling this game. Because that announcer was unceremoniously and completely out of the blue removed from this assignment to bring Danielson and Musburger on, which is when chaos ensued, and further ensued when the broadcast did not go well in the slightest bit. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances, the craziest broadcasting controversy in the history of the wildcard round, and one of the craziest controversies ever for ABC when it came to broadcasting the NFL playoffs. Before I talk about the actual controversy in question and what went down, we need some context to understand what ABC usually did for Wildcard Weekend, and why they decided to reverse course for this year in particular. In 1996, Disney bought ABC and ESPN. At the time, ABC held the rights to Monday Night Football, and ESPN held the rights to Sunday Night Football, so each network would be broadcasting NFL games weekly and regularly. During Wildcard Weekend, there were 4 games played, with 1 being on CBS, 1 being on Fox, and 2 on Saturday being on ABC. These were the only 2 playoff games that ABC had each year, unless they got the rights to broadcast the Super Bowl, which coincidentally, they would have during this 2002 season of theirs. So how are you broadcasting the 2 wildcard games, since they take place on the same day back-to-back, and you only have 1 broadcasting team for the NFL on ABC, which is the Monday Night Crew? Simple. You just have the ESPN crew do the other game. Put the main team of Al Michaels and John Madden on one of the games, and then, for the other game, you put in the ESPN crew, this crew right here, that usually does Sunday Night Football. Easy enough, and that's what ABC had done for the past half-decade, which is what you've been watching this whole time. During the 1996 season, the main Monday Night Crew of Al Michaels, Frank Gifford, and Dan Dierdorf worked the Vikings-Cowboys game, while Mike Patrick and Joe Theismann, as in the ESPN Sunday Night Football crew, worked the Jaguars-Bills game. In 1997, the Sunday Night Crew worked the game between the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants. In 1998, the Sunday Night Crew worked the game between the Arizona Cardinals and the Dallas Cowboys. In 1999, the Sunday Night Crew worked the Music City Miracle, as in the game between the Buffalo Bills and the Tennessee Titans. In 2000, the Sunday Night Crew worked the game between the Indianapolis Colts and the Miami Dolphins. And in 2001, the Sunday Night Crew worked the game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Philadelphia Eagles. You get the idea. It was a guarantee that the Sunday Night ESPN crew would get whichever game the main Monday Night Football crew on ABC didn't get. And it made complete sense as to why. They called the NFL all season, they work for the same parent company, and you know they're prepared and know what they're talking about. So just do that and make things simple and easy on yourself. However, even though ESPN and ABC were both owned by Disney, they were not the same thing, which meant that every single time that ABC broadcast that other playoff game and used the ESPN crew, they had to pay up. It wasn't written into the contract with the booth of Joe Theismann, Mike Patrick, and Paul McGuire that they were guaranteed a playoff game. Because why would it be? They're employees of ESPN, not ABC. If ABC wanted to go with the ESPN crew, they had to pay an extra fee that they might not have to pay other announcers. And keep in mind, ABC was suffering badly, and I truly mean badly, back in 2002. I somewhat talked about this in a previous video of mine, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, they were quickly falling behind CBS, NBC, and Fox to become the 4th most popular network as part of the new Big Four. It was the worst time for ABC since the 1960s. New shows weren't working. Monday Night Football ratings were declining and were getting worse on a yearly basis. The Dennis Miller experiment, where they threw a boatload of money at the comedian to get him to call games, backfired, and they were still reeling from that. And during the 2001-2002 season, of the top 21 shows in the country, and I say 21 because there was a tie for 20th, with the exception of Monday Night Football, ABC had none of them. Nothing inside the top 20. Bottom line, ABC was not in a position to spend a ton of extra money. I don't know how much the 3-man booth of Theismann, Patrick, and McGuire would have cost, but it obviously would have been more than $0. So ABC decided to call an audible for this season. They decided, screw paying the NFL guys. We'll just use college announcers for this game who hadn't called an NFL game all season. For this game right here that you're watching, the battle between the Indianapolis Colts and the New York Jets, we're just going to use our #1 college crew of Brent Musburger and Gary Danielson. Usually, using the #1 college crew would not even be an option, since they'd either be working the national championship, whichever BCS bowl game happened to have it, or they'd be working the Rose Bowl. However, it worked out this way for two reasons. Number one, ABC had a rotation with their college football announcers in terms of who got to call the championship, so it wasn't the same crew every year. Keith Jackson and Dan Fouts called the national championship during the 2002 season, but Brent Musburger and Gary Danielson would call it in 2003. And during the 2000 season, Brad Nessler and Bob Greasy called the game. It was a bizarre system. Imagine if CBS alternated between Jim Nantz, I'm Eagle, and Kevin Harlan on a yearly basis for their Super Bowls. But that's just how it worked back then. And number two, not only did the college football schedule work out well, but so did the NFL schedule. Usually, something like this would not have been possible with the NFL, because Wild Card Weekend was smack dab in the middle of the bowl season, taking place in late December. The 2002 season was one of the rare times where it was completely 100% planned that Wild Card Weekend would be taking place in January after New Year's. And with the Rose Bowl taking place on a Wednesday, and this game taking place on a Saturday, it was possible to get the crews and everyone over from one game to the other, since there was somewhat of a buffer. When you take all of those factors into account, it makes complete sense as to why ABC thought that this was a good idea on paper. The schedule works out, we need to save money, and let's be honest, no one's watching the game because of the announcers. You're watching the game regardless of who is up there in the booth, because it's an NFL playoff game. So let's save money and have our number one college crew work the game instead of hiring the ESPN crew. Said Mark Mandel, the vice president of media relations for ABC Sports, there were talks with ESPN, and we value what they have done in the past, but we are always seeking to keep our stamp on our own programming. And fortunately, the schedule allowed for announcers who are more known as ABC announcers to do the game. And look, if that was the end of the matter, then while this would be a unique story for sure, it would be nothing more than a footnote and a complete non-controversy. Except there was one person who didn't take too kindly to the news about the broadcast change for this game that you've been watching this whole time. And as you might have been able to guess, that person was this man right here. None other than Joe Theismann, who felt that he was completely shafted. The news that he wouldn't be able to work this game came as a complete shock to him, especially since that was the way it always had been. You're telling me I thought I was going to do this game. I was preparing to do this game. I had it marked in my calendar. And you're not just going to snub our hardworking crew, but you're going to do it to bring on people who hadn't called the game all season? As Theismann said, we had done a wildcard game the last 6 years. I feel disappointed that we aren't given the opportunity. I absolutely love football. When I was a player, I would work all year for the opportunity to get into the playoffs. This year, we won't get into the playoffs. Even Theismann's agent, Sandy Montag, came out and put ABC on blast for this decision. As he said, in these tough economic times, ABC can just assign its network announcers to the game instead of paying extra for an ESPN crew. And it is true. ABC was in a dire financial situation back then with all of its ratings failures and declines, and with $550 million tied up to the NFL, and a lot of money tied up to John Madden, who they just acquired from Fox. And in many ways, it makes sense why there would be some confusion and outrage over this game from everyone. Because let's be honest, this is not enough time to prepare for a game. Brent Musburger and Gary Danielson didn't work a single game all season in the NFL. And now, they're being asked to call a completely different league in a high-stakes situation, at the expense of guys who had done it before. One of the most important parts about calling a game is preparation, and all the work that goes into the game before you ever step in front of a microphone and talk. You need to know the teams inside and out, and obviously, Musburger and Danielson could learn the teams, but it's not the same. For one, you lose a lot of the nuance with the storylines when you're not living in the moment. Number two, it's not like they had all year to study for this game. They only knew their assignment early Monday morning or late Sunday night when the playoff schedule was finalized. So they didn't know their assignment super far in advance, and they wouldn't be able to do any real prep work for it until after the Rose Bowl was done that Wednesday, meaning that they had about 2 days to prepare for this game. That is no time at all. Astute broadcasters who go through their notes and research and like to break down film to find tendencies and trends will watch every game that a team plays over the course of a season. It is an intensive job, especially because they can go back and reference certain situations on the fly. It's what I do often in Dumb Decisions and in these videos, where I can just say off the top of my head what a certain situation reminds me of and how it's identical to this, or nearly similar. Each broadcast is 3 hours long, and the Jets and Colts both played 16 games. So if Musburger and Danielson just wanted to spend time after the Rose Bowl doing nothing but watching film, meaning no meetings with other coaches, no time for sleep or broadcast meetings, no time for eating, no time for working out or leisure, and no time for anything but watching film, pulling nothing but all-nighters and being completely sleep-deprived, it would take them 96 hours to watch all the footage, and they only had about 48 hours to prepare for this game. Yes, you have commercials that make up a good hour of the broadcast, but even if you take those out, you're still not going to have enough time to do everything. It is impossible to properly prepare for an assignment like this when you've never called an NFL game before this season. If you gave me 2 days from the time of this video to call the Bills-Steelers game on Sunday, alright, I could do that. It wouldn't be easy by any means, but I've watched so many of their games and followed them so closely that I could do it. If you gave me 2 days from the time of this video to call a game in La Liga, the top league of Spanish soccer, no, I could not do that. I have my limitations with knowledge and how much I can properly do and research and study in a short amount of time. And maybe this wouldn't be as big of a deal if it wasn't for the fact that it became very apparent throughout the broadcast that Gary Danielson was not even remotely comfortable with the NFL and was not in tune with how things worked, with one writer penning the strange decision to have Musburger and Danielson call the game, and saying that the game suffered from poor work and foul-ups. One of the most notable examples was this play right here in the second quarter. With the Jets leading at 10-0 after a 41-yard field goal by John Hall, Hall kicked it off to Troy Walters on the Colts. Walters fumbled the ball, and Ray Mickens recovered for the Jets, giving the Jets great field position, deep inside Colts territory. And that's when Gary Danielson had this, shall we say, bizarre comment about the Colts and Tony Dungy and his coaching strategy.
Pop loose, and Tony Dungy gambled a bit. They won the toss. Usually the teams defer. He took the ball, and he has not scored.
Wait a second, time out. Most teams defer? Tony Dungy gambled a bit by taking the ball first? I'm sorry, what? First off, when I think of gambling, I think of something like going for on a 4th down, or trying a trick play, or something along those lines. I don't think of a team receiving the ball on the opening kickoff. I don't view that as a gamble. That's a pretty binary option. Either you receive or you kick. Personally, I love kicking off to start the game and having the chance to double up. But I wouldn't say it's a gamble if you don't do that. But number 2, that's besides the point. This statement is objectively wrong. It is plain and simple, objectively wrong. Yes, in college, the sport that Gary Danielson is known for calling, most teams deferred. But back in 2002 in the NFL, most teams actually received the ball. In fact, the Colts played 16 games during the regular season. Want to know how many games in those 16 that the team that won the coin toss, whether it was the Colts or the opposing team, ended up receiving the opening kickoff? That's right, 16 times! 16 freaking times! Literally, 100% of the time, the team that won the toss received the kickoff. What about the Jets? In their 16 games in 2002, the team that won the coin toss chose to receive the kickoff 15 out of 16 times. The only exception was in Week 1, when the Jets won the toss and deferred to the second half. So in the last 15 games that they played, the winner of the toss got the ball to start. Here it is in pie chart form, just to illustrate how asinine Gary Danielson's comments were. 31 out of 32 times, in a game played in 2002, with either the Jets or the Colts, the winner of the coin toss received the ball. That was just something you did in the NFL back then. You would know that if you were prepared or were in tune with the NFL, but very clearly, you were not, and maybe ABC shouldn't have saved a buck to put you on a freaking playoff game if that was the case. That's like saying in the NFL today that if you choose to receive the ball in overtime off the coin toss, then it's a gamble, because in college, most teams choose to defer their possession. Like, come on. The whole broadcast was like that. And as writer Jerry Lindquist so eloquently said about Danielson's performance and the decision by ABC to save money and have the crew do this game, bad move. Bad move indeed. Just to highlight some of the absolute drivel that came out of Gary Danielson's mouth during this game, simply because it seemed like he was watching the NFL for the first time after being awoken from a 10-year coma or something like that. Here he is talking about what yards from scrimmage means, as if this was some brand new advanced analytic that no one knew about.
It's yards from scrimmage, not just rushing yards is how you measure these guys. Those short passes like that establishes your running back, whether you're running or just dumping it off short to him.
Thanks, Captain Obvious. Or what about this time, where he talks about how to play National Football League defense, almost comparing it to the college game for no reason.
They're getting off blocks. It's no mystery how to play National Football League defense. You're going to get blocked, but you have to get off the blocks and then make the tackle.
How to play defense in the NFL. Step 1, get off the blocks. Step 2, make the tackle. There's no insight here as to the players or the teams. He's just talking in generalities, which is what you do when you're not prepared and know the true intricacies of a team. And again, I can't blame Danielson entirely for this, seeing as he had no time to prepare, because ABC had this absolutely terrible idea. But it made for a bad broadcast, I'll put it that way. The following year, during the 2003-04 playoffs, ABC either realized their mistake with this broadcast, or the schedule with college football didn't quite work out as well with the turnaround time from the Rose Bowl to the playoffs, and they decided to reverse course and go back to what they originally had, which was having the Sunday night crew of Mike Patrick, Paul McGuire, and Joe Theismann working the first wildcard game, and then you had Al Michaels and John Madden on the second wildcard game, as was tradition. So this truly was a one-time experiment, even if it was a complete disaster in the end. They did it in 2004 and 2005 as well, before they lost the rights to the NFL after the 2005 season. But for the 2002 playoffs, the Colts weren't the only team to suffer on this day. Our eardrums suffered as well. As a side note, you might notice the case behind me right here. It's pretty obvious what the Jets and Colts helmets represent, but what about the bottom row? What does the bottom row represent? It has to do with something in our story, and if you think you know the answer, let me know in the comments down below. Long story short, what this entire debacle can be boiled down to is, plain and simply put, greed. ABC didn't want to dish out extra money, so they went with one of their crews that had no experience whatsoever calling NFL games this season, and it made them look completely amateurish, while also blindsiding Joe Theismann in the process. The only thing worse than the Colts' performance on this day was ABC's decision when it came to a quality standpoint, although at the very least, they reversed course the following year and until the end of their deal with the NFL after the 2005 season. Either way, I think it's safe to say that the decision by ABC to have Brent Musburger and Gary Danielson work a wildcard game was nothing short of wild. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.